Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with my review for True Detective Season 3, Episode 1. Alright, so this was one of my most anticipated shows going into 2019. Great way to start off the year, right? So True Detective Season 3 started up last night. HBO put out 2 episodes back to back. They put out this episode, episode 1 and 2, just airing back to back. So I think some people are maybe thinking that it was just all one episode, but it was 2 episodes in total. So I'll be making this review now, and then hopefully either later today or tomorrow, I will have episode 2 review out, and then I'll be doing them week to week. So keep coming back for reviews of the episodes, recaps as well. So anyway, so yeah, let's dive into this one. It pretty much met my expectations, and my expectations were pretty high for this episode and for this series in general. Some big names in the cast, of course, starting with Mahershala Ali. Amazing job, and he's been amazing in a lot of other things. I remember first thing I saw him in was a 4400, which is kind of funny thinking back, and now he's back on TV and back in a starring role with True Detective. So, a lot of people a little negative about season 2, right, of True Detective. I would ultimately agree. I definitely did like season 1 better. I'm not going to hate on season 2, but, I love Vince Vaughn, and so maybe that's another reason why I enjoyed it a little bit more than some other people. But I do definitely recognize that season 1 was, definitely better. But anyways, I think everyone is ready to give season 3 a chance, and I really do think it performs. So anyways, I'll get into a recap here of the episode, then go over my rating, favorite character, and some more overall thoughts of the episode, and maybe some theories going forward for the series. If you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Would really appreciate it. So, alright, let's get into the recap. So, of course, with this series that they're doing kind of 3 different timelines, right? And we're jumping all around with the 3 throughout the episode, and they do a really good job of transitioning between the timelines throughout the episode. And so the way they're kind of telling this from 3 perspectives, but also first starting off with current times, which is what I will refer to as Old Man Hayes, or the Older Man Hayes. Of course, Wayne Hayes, main character, our detective, Mahershala Ali. And so that is the current times, and then we get obviously the 90s, which is 10 years after the case, and then we get the 80s where the case actually occurred, and we're getting kind of the live story of how it all played out. So I do really like that, and so that's maybe the way that we'll kind of frame this recap. So we start off here in the current times with the older man Hayes listening to the tape of himself, telling him what day it is, and telling him himself that he has memory problems, right on this tape as he listens in his bedroom. And then he's listening to this tape, but then he's also remembering back to this deposition about the Purcell case. That's, what they're calling it there. And so we get the idea that this deposition is taking place 10 years after the original case took place, right? And so they're basically getting his statement because they want to reopen the case, whether they thought he didn't follow protocol, or they got the wrong guy or something like that. They're opening up the case to a retrial pretty much, and they're getting his statement, which also, it was pointed out too that he has quit the force at this point. So he's no longer with the police department, I guess the force. He's no longer with the police department at this point when he's getting this deposition. So then, really great way of transitioning again. So that's all we get. We already get introduced to all 3 different timelines, right? And then they say, can you tell us about your, memory of the events, or something like that, right? And so that's then when we get into the story of the true crime, right? That's what this series is going to be about. So right off the bat, they're establishing those 3 different timelines: 2015, 90s, 80s. So keep that in mind as we go. So then the story begins, right? So the kids leave their house on bikes. The dad says, be home before dark, and, everything's good. They just go out, right? But then we also see that 3 teenage boys sit and watch them from their car, which was very kind of creepy, right? And so they're just kind of like sitting there watching them, and so we don't get all the details, right? But we just see the kids riding off, the teenagers are there, and then later on we see them at the park also, and the teenagers, it looks like those same teenagers. By the way, the ones in 13 Reasons Why, I recognized him right away, Justin. But anyways, so it looks like later on they're actually playing with the kids' bikes there at the park where that water tower is, where Hayes later goes. So that is really interesting there. But that's about as much as we get in terms of details with this case. So then Hayes and his partner basically have nothing to do. We watch them kind of just sitting around in lawn chairs, and of course Roland almost shoots the fox or whatever, and they're just drinking beer, right? Nothing much to do. So they start driving around, right? And seeing if they can beat someone up or something, they said. And so then the kid's dad, the kids don't return, right? So the kid's dad goes looking for them, and when they don't return by nightfall, right, he gets really worried. So he goes out in his car, he calls their friend, I guess, and they don't know where they are either. So he, obviously is kind of freaking out now that the kids are gone. And this is the exact time that Hayes and Roland, or Wayne and Roland, get the 911 call for a missing persons, and then the case begins. So they get the call, and then they kind of drive over there, put on this the siren, and they get over to the house. So there you go. So then we are back with the older man Hayes in current times, getting interviewed by a TV station about his wife and also the case and her book that she also published because of the case. And of course, we're back in 2015, right? So then we're getting that little interview there, and that's how he's starting to remember the case again, right? It's because now he's having to go through it all with this interview person. So then we see back to, right, they're jumping all over the place. But anyways, go back to the 80s. Hayes and West go inside Mr. Purcell's house, took for clues of the missing children, right? The father says there's nothing in the house, but they want to go look anyways, because even Mr. Purcell isn't ruled out right now, right? I mean, he could be involved. And so they have to go in there, they're looking for clues, and then their mother shows up, which is interesting because they, first thought was, oh, the kids are probably with the mom, she didn't tell the dad, that's what's going on. But it turns out that is ruled out right away as the mom comes home and arrives, and of course Mr. Purcell and her not having the best relationship, right, the dad and mom, and obviously they get in a fight pretty quickly, right? And so then when she comes home, and they don't find any clues, that is when they launch a major investigation with several officers taking place looking for these kids who they actually know are really, really missing now, not just with the mom, for example, right? And so then we also see that Hayes finds a hole in the wall of the boy's closet, which is interesting, right? So that kind of seemed like a pretty big detail. They put a lot of emphasis on that. This is when Hayes and Roland are kind of looking around the house after the mom gets there, and they find this little peephole in a way through the boy's closet, which is, again, they put a lot of emphasis on it, and it also rings back to then the scene right after it, when the mom says that her cousin was staying there and also staying in the boy's room. So was he the one who drilled that hole in the closet, which also then peered into, I guess, the daughter's room? So interesting stuff there, right? I mean, kind of a creepy thing, but it really is, and we don't get a lot more detail about it, but that's definitely interesting. So we see Hayes and West go question a bunch of neighbors, and also the mom and dad asking about what happened. So they find out about the teenagers that saw them, right? They find out about them and how they go up to the park, I guess. They also find out about the trash man that people call him, Mr. Woodard, I believe is his name. And also then the mom says about the cousin who lived at the house and lived in the boy's room. That's also when they find those Playboy magazines, right? And that comes back next episode. So all don't seem to be too serious of leads right now, right? I mean, the closet thing's interesting. They put some emphasis on it. But there's nothing that is concrete that says, this is what happened, right? So there's not any big leads so far. So then the next day, everything comes out, right? The story breaks out to the news. They get the whole community together. Everyone is out looking for them in the town. Everyone's volunteering and, checking out, all the clues and letting them know, telling them some facts and some stuff that can maybe help them in the case. So definitely good there and a good start. And it's also daytime, so they get out looking right away. So then Hayes and Roland, they go to the school, right, to question those teenagers that they heard about. And just the classic teenager thing, right? They are lying, right? But the story's really conflicting too. The one says that they may have seen them there. The one says they definitely did not see them at the park, at the water tower there. So, it's just kind of a typical teenagers, not too reliable, and, probably all of them were drunk or, high or something like that there. And so they probably don't have the best recollection. But I did like the way that they were kind of dealing with them and being realistic too. So they may have been at the park, is what we know as of now from these teenagers. So then this was kind of the start of more of the character focus for Wayne Hayes, and that was when he meets the English teacher at the school named Amelia. And you really just see that right away, both of them connecting, right away. And also, obviously, this is his future wife, right? And I figured that out pretty quick, but I think they reveal it later in the episode. But anyways, yeah, pretty quickly I figured out that is his wife in the future there. So anyways, you can really see the connection there, and also some great character building then for Hayes. We learn a little bit more about him, and also a little bit more about her, and then their relationship going forward. So there you go. And also her relationship comes in handy next episode when they talk about the Halloween dolls and all that stuff, right? So then they go to the trash man or Woodard's house there. He's not home, but they also find out, he's a former war veteran. They find some interesting stuff. He basically collects trash and sells it right around the town. And it just seems like, nothing really suspicious here, right? But he is a war veteran. They take in that to account, that some of the veterans have been known to come back from Vietnam and be, criminals and go to jail and stuff. And they're talking a little bit about that. So they don't totally rule out the guy, but it's possible still, right? And so then I love this. When I was talking about the transitions earlier, amazing transition. Suddenly, the scene itself in the 80s just stops, right? And then we get Wayne Hayes looking in the mirror there, and then it totally, goes and switches right back to the current times. So some really great transitions here. So we're back to current times, and he all of a sudden just becomes very fluttered about everything. Also, it's because they're talking about Vietnam, and of course he was a veteran in the war, and so obviously that would bring back memories for him. And so all of a sudden he gets fluttered, leaves the interview with the girl there at his house, tells the reporters to get out of there, right? And so he kind of breaks the whole thing up. So that was interesting too. Also attributing there to his memory and how this case really did affect him. And also Vietnam affected him too. So then we're back, right? We're back to the 80s. So Hayes then goes and finds the water tower at the park where we saw the teenagers before. And this was because of his tracking skills. We heard Roland West talking to another policeman there, telling him all about his, tracking skills and how he used that in Vietnam and everything. So that's going to come in handy. I think that's going to be an important detail going forward, especially with his efforts in finding the girl now, right? Which, spoiler, I guess, but we know she's still alive, and he didn't find her. But we'll have to see how that turns out. So he finds out then one of the bikes down by the creek, and then he finds this kind of weird path going down to the creek there, to the water from the water tower there. Or I guess it's not necessarily a water tower, but it's, the big tower there in the park, right? And so he's going around there. We're kind of getting closer. We're getting closer. And then he finds multiple handcrafted angels, it looks like, kind of placed in random, spots of the forest. One is placed right there by the bike. And then he sees another one coming up in the cave. And so essentially, these angels are leading him then to the boy's body, which he finds just a couple minutes later. So then he finds the boy's body finally tucked in the side of a cave, which the weirdest part of this is that the boy's hands were like placed together and it looked like he was almost praying, right? And then we also get, the angels that kind of led, all these dolls are leading a path to the body, and there was an angel right there near his body, and he was dead. The boy's dead in the cave there. So crazy stuff, right? The mystery just builds, right? They can't just give us, dead body. No, there's got to be angels and the boy's praying, in this praying motion, there in the cave. So crazy stuff. Of course, Hayes is kind of totally, just he can't believe what he's seeing, right? And the dolls don't really make a lot of sense at the point in time. So it's really kind of an odd thing, but he does finally find the body, which the others definitely would not. They went in a totally other direction, and Hayes was able to find them, or find him, sorry. So obviously then this brings up, where's the girl, right? You'd think that both of them may be together, but it's definitely interesting now that the girl's not there, right? So then we go back to the deposition in the 90s, and then the man tells Hayes that they found Julie Purcell's, which is the daughter, they found her fingerprints at a robbery that took place a couple months ago, and that she is still alive. And of course, this, just totally gets to Hayes, and he can't believe it, that Julie is still alive. So then we go back, right? We go back in time to the 80s, and Hayes tells, Roland that he's going out to look for her, right? And that he probably spends then a lot of his life between the 80s and the 90s looking for the girl. That's the impression that we get. And now he just heard, right, that she's still alive in the 90s. So the way that these timelines kind of are breaking everything up are really interesting and create even more mystery, because we know what happened in the 80s, and now we're getting a little bit of clues sprinkled in there from the 90s that's going to influence that. So really great stuff here. And so, of course, in the 80s, then he goes off to look for the girl, which then, next episode, we kind of come to a head, and they're looking for some other stuff, focusing on the murder of the boy. But really great stuff. So that's pretty much the end of the episode there. Where basically Hayes is told then at the deposition that Julie Purcell is still alive, and that they found her fingerprints at this robbery. Crazy stuff. So a great cliffhanger there. Obviously, Hayes kind of, totally just surprised, totally blown away that this news that she's still alive, and also brings some mystery then to, did he really screw it up, right? The fact that this girl is still alive and they closed this case, maybe he did actually screw it up. So bringing that definitely to the forefront, right? And so one thing that I just wanted to point out, though, too, is what I got an impression from this episode as well, especially this ending, is, and episode 2, is this story is as much about Wayne Hayes as it is, like, as a person, as an individual, as it is the Purcell case. I mean, this series is really going to be, brought to us from the perspective, of course, of Wayne Hayes. He's our main character, but also telling the story of his life in these 3 different timelines, and of course how his current time is affected, which we've already seen in these 2 episodes. And obviously the case is the main plot, the main focus, but his life is also the main focus. So they're doing a really good job of bringing both of those things into the story here, which makes it even more interesting and mysterious. So anyways, great cliffhanger to end off the episode. Alright, so in terms of a rating for this episode, I'm going to give it a 4.8 out of 5. This episode was nearly perfect. One big negative, though, that I have. So, I'm talking about the timelines. I love how it creates the mystery a little bit, makes it a little bit more interesting, and of course, the way that they're focusing on his life, really great. But I will say the timelines create a pacing issue. And, the transitions are pretty good throughout, right? They do a good job of transitioning, making sure that you know which timeline it is, though. That's a big thing, right? If we didn't know what timeline it was, it might be a little bit frustrating. But anyways, I just think it creates a little bit of a pacing issue, especially the way they used it, right? Is because we get in to the 80s, and we're learning the storyline. He finds the boy's body, right? All this stuff is really intense. And then the whole pacing is broken up then while we return to current times, where he, tells the interviewers to leave, right? That's a good example. So that's my really only negative so far with this episode, and also going forward, is that I'm just afraid the timelines and the way that they use them is going to create a big pacing issue with the show. And I mean, we're just getting to the meat of it, and then they go back to current times, right? I wonder how much they're going to do this going forward, if eventually they'll actually focus then on just one of those timelines. I think we're going to get a lot of focus on the 90s coming up in episode 3 and 4. It looks like, due to the teaser that they released, it really looks like they're going to do a lot of focus on the 90s coming up. So I'm sure that maybe as we go on, it will get a little bit better. But just in this first episode, the pacing was just kind of all over the place because of this. And I just feel like for an episode like this, where you're trying to get us involved, trying to get us intrigued with this story in this case, it's going to create a little bit of an issue, just bouncing all over the place with these timelines and breaking up that pacing. So that is honestly my only negative, really, with this episode and the series so far. I really did love it, but I will say, and also, they're kind of going out of chronological order here too. I mean, like, you're doing the timelines and stuff too, but they're also going out of chronological order with this storytelling. So they're really going all over the place here. But I will say that type of storytelling, that non-chronological storytelling, I think is going to pay off in the long run, because I think it's going to have an even more kind of intriguing and surprising kind of twist ending with the chronological order, because they can do so many things. I mean, Westworld's a great example of that. Not telling things in chronological order, and then at the end it's like a crazy ending that you never would have predicted, because they use those timelines and they work with time so flawlessly. So for that reason, I mean, yes, I think it's going to create a good payoff in the end, especially with this type of storytelling, the timelines, the chronology, and it's going to create a lot more mystery too, as we already see. But I do think it's going to create a pacing issue. So anyways, there's good and bad to both things there. But we'll have to see, of course, as we go. So the cast, I'll talk about Mahershala Ali in just a couple minutes. But the cast, really great. Was it Jonathan Dorff? No, Stephen Dorff plays Roland West. I thought he was really great. I mean, Mahershala Ali, obviously the standout, but I thought he was great too. And then, of course, we get Carmen Ejogo, I think is her name. She was great. I'm going to talk a little bit more about her in episode 2, because she gets a little bit more of a focus. But the cast so far is really great. And also, just great story building in this episode. I thought the character building was more next episode, but the story building was really great. Like I said, introducing those 3 timelines very early on, and also sticking with it throughout the episode. Not just the first few minutes, right? They really did stick with it. So, really great episode here. And also, of course, create a great story, a great true crime mystery at the beginning. Favorite character for this one, without a doubt, is Wayne Hayes, played by Mahershala Ali. My God. I mean, going into this, I knew that he was going to be an absolute force, right? He was going to give an amazing performance. He really is. I mean, I saw someone say he's one of the best actors out there right now. I'm not sure I quite agree with that, but I do agree that he's probably one of the best actors on television right now. I would definitely give you that. Especially now coming back to television with True Detective. I mean, he is just fantastic. I mean, and he's playing 3 different timelines here, and he's playing, an old man in his 80s, and he's doing an amazing job at that. And by the way, really great makeup and effects there. That really does look like he's a lot older. But yeah, I mean, he is just so great in this episode. Really carries the show, especially in this first episode. And of course, there's a lot of focus on him too as a character. So really amazing job here. And we'll have to see how Wayne Hayes transforms and changes as the story goes on. Because of course, we know just from all 3 timelines that this case pretty much shaped his life. I don't remember if it was the next episode or this episode where he says, I used to think of life before and after Nam, but now I think of it as before and after the Purcell case. So that means the Purcell case maybe even had a more significant impact on his life than Vietnam. Which, is something to definitely, that's interesting, right? Because a lot of people, and even he says earlier in the episode that Nam had a lot of effect on him. So, anyways, really great stuff here. Mahershala Ali, I'm telling you, he's going to get nominated for an Emmy. He might even win for this performance. I mean, he is amazing. But anyways, we kind of knew that going in. Not a surprise, but still, he deserves a lot of credit. So, anyways, guys, that'll just about do it then for my review of True Detective Season 3, Episode 1. In my opinion, True Detective is back. I think this season is going to be amazing. The way that they're kind of orchestrating the story here with the 3 different timelines, the chronology that they're working with, and also just a really intriguing case here with a true crime aspect to it. Really, really great. And of course, Ozarks, I forgot to mention that, but really great world building there with that as well. Anyways, yeah, so that'll just about do for the review. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode and on the series. What do you think of the first episode or the first couple episodes? And where do you think this is going to go? My theory right now, my prediction is that the mom's cousin has something to do, especially with that hole in the closet wall. But that's just my thought. So anyways, we'll see you then in my review for episode 2, which should be out either later today or tomorrow. So please tune in to that one as well. Anyways, guys, again, thank you so much for watching this one. Thank you so much for the support on the channel. I do really appreciate it. A lot more reviews coming in the next few weeks with a bunch of new shows coming out. So please stay tuned for those as well. Alright, guys, we'll see you then in my next review.